Good afternoon. I am Michael Malice, and let that be your welcome for the next hour. I'm really excited for my guest today. We have Nomiki Konst, who is a candidate for public advocate here in New York.
True.
My favorite Democratic socialist.
Yeah, I'm so proud.
It's true.
Because we're growing. There's a lot more now.
Yeah, I want to talk to you a lot about that because this is very much something that's having a moment in politics and especially in the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about your campaign first because I think that's the most important stuff.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
I just realized there's a typo on your shirt.
There isn't. So the first thing I said is let this be your welcome.
Oh. You're so tricky.
See?
I knew there was something there.
Yeah.
How many people catch that?
It's meant to for people to catch it incorrectly.
Right.
Because it's correct.
Right. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
But do people actually catch it?
Oh, yeah.
Because you have a really smart show.
I also like to tell people on Twitter that Trump wants the wall. Hitler built the Berlin Wall. Wake up. And then they start arguing with me that Hitler did not build the Berlin Wall. And then I tell them, well, his book, Mein Kampf, is called My Wall. And it had the blueprints for it. And I'm arguing right now, like with people.
This is happening right now.
This is Eric Solwall yesterday,
Right.
the congressman, had a tweet about Trump. And he said, this isn't what people need nowadays. It was medieval times. I go, Hitler built the Berlin Wall. That was 50 years ago. That's not medieval. And people are like, that's not 50. Yeah. So you got to have throw in a lot of mistakes so people will just catch the one and
You should be public advocate.
Okay, I'm not for public anything. I'm an anarchist. I'm for private everything.
But you would like to annihilate the government, and the best way to do that is to be the watchdog for the city.
Okay, so most people do not even know what the public advocate is, and it's a relatively new position.
Yeah, so the Office of the Public Advocate...
Oh, I want to say one more thing. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, it's okay.
You're the first person campaigning for anything that I've had on my show. Because as an anarchist, I'm not for it, but I want to hear your point of view. So you're the first person.
Do anarchists vote? Is there?
No.
So in DSA, we have this split between the electoral folks and the non-electoral folks.
We're the second one.
You're the second. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Voting
then there's
only
like
encourages them.
anarchist overlap with Democratic Socialists and Socialist Alternative.
Right.
We're getting really deep into the DSA world.
But it's the
already.
same thing over on this side. It's a lot of like, oh, you're not pure enough. Like,
Right.
you're actually a statist, or I don't know, you would say a class traitor. So what is the public advocate?
So the public advocate is the second in line to the mayor. I don't think it should be, but I'll get to that in a second. It is the watchdog for the city. It's there to be a check on city council, city agencies, the mayor, the all different departments, whether it's NYCHA, and it's also the advocate for the people. And it came out of a set of scandals in the 80s, the late 80s, in which, oh, shocker, the real estate industry
Right.
was drowning out the voices and the power of New Yorkers, including the most marginalized members of our communities. So the purpose of this job is really to hold everybody accountable in New York government, including, in my opinion, political machines, special interest groups, and all the politicians and agencies that are supposed to represent us.
Political machines in New York City have gone hand in hand since day one.
Right.
Tammany is
yeah.
a New York City institution. You can see the Tammany sign still in Union Square, just east of Union Square. What power does the public advocate actually have to enforce these kind of things?
So this is a big area of debate right now. And there is a city council bill that it's not legal. It's not going to happen. But it was posturing by somebody from another political machine trying to basically bully another public advocate candidate. But they want to get rid of the Office of Public Advocate. And they say, oh, it's useless. It's not there for anything. And, nobody who's ever public advocate, because it's only been around since 1993, no one's ever really done anything. Well, I went back. The reason why I'm running is I was doing research as a reporter. I was doing research on the Office of Public Advocate. I thought, oh my God, this office is kind of amazing. No, you can't subpoena. The budget's not that large. But as a reporter who hasn't had researchers, as a reporter who didn't have a huge budget and 80 people on my team, I was able to do a lot like, I don't know, find out where the Democratic Party wasted all its money, or cover the IDC, which was 8 members of the Democratic Senate that were holding up
Right.
the Senate here in New York. That was done with just one person following the money. Now, imagine if a public advocate was actually doing what it was designed to do, which is not just holding city government accountable, but to investigate, to advocate. You can introduce legislation. You can hire outside counsel if you want to go that far. But I think there's also a media office that it oversees in terms of educating New Yorkers, informing New Yorkers about different ideas and thoughts and programs. I think I would like to decentralize the office. I think it's too bureaucratic. People even today I was out petitioning, hence my dress today. I was out petitioning in the rain, and I just kept running into people who said, I went to my city council member, or I went to one of your opponents who's a city council member, and they never got back to me. And then I went to the public advocate's office, which is there to make sure that my city council member's representing me, and then they didn't get back to me. And so right away I realized this office, even though it's $3.5 million, the budget, and to put this into perspective, the highest paid person in all of New York City is a loan shark, and he makes double the entire office of public advocate, and he's representing the banks. So one person representing the banks has the highest salary in all of New York at $7 million. I mean, he gets commissions. And the entire office that's supposed to represent the poorest communities, the most powerless people of New York, that office makes half of what that guy representing the banks are. And that's where our values are, unfortunately.
You cut your teeth on the Bernie Sanders campaign. One of the criticisms that many people on the left have had, which I think is almost undeniable, is that historically the Democratic Party was for the poor. And that in maybe since the Clinton years with the DLC, it's become this corporate advocate of the so-called middle class, which usually means business. And then you're not going to have the Republicans looking out for the people at the very bottom. So they're the ones who are most vulnerable, but they're also the ones who are going to be the first to get screwed. Do you think that's an accurate representation of where the Democratic Party had been in recent years?
Yeah, absolutely. I still think it's there. I think it's tremendous that we have voices that have just entered Congress that come out of working class backgrounds, organizing backgrounds, union backgrounds. I think that really helps the Democratic Party. But I was on the Bernie campaign, as you mentioned. I was a surrogate for him. We went around the country. We went to different states and didn't just do rallies and events, but we actually got involved in communities. Talking to folks and figuring out what are their needs and concerns, because we wanted to make sure that the platform, the Democratic platform that we ended up passing with a very big fight, was representing all communities. And it was a learning experience. So what I learned through that, we went to the platform committee, and half the platform committee was made up of Hillary appointees. And they were not just lobbyists, they were arms dealers. They were people who, led think tanks that took all their money from Saudi Arabia. And it's just the ideologies of the party are so far, they're so distant from the intent of the party, the design of the party, the infrastructure of the party, the way it was designed to be, that we knew that there needed to be reform. And so after Secretary Clinton essentially cut a deal with Bernie Sanders so that he wouldn't take a floor fight at the convention because he had enough votes, membership votes, when, I don't know if you remember the whole superdelegate debate.
Yeah, of course.
But she only won because of superdelegates, and they all lined up for her way before they were even allowed to vote, a year before they were allowed to vote. So he had enough delegates to have a floor fight, at least over a few issues.
Yeah.
And they decided not to do it. And what he got out of it was this reform commission. And the reform commission, he still was in the minority in terms of who he could appoint to the reform commission. But he was able to appoint 7 members and a vice chair. She appointed 9 members and a chair. And the new DNC chair, who ended up being Tom Perez, was able to appoint 3. And so I was one of the members of the Reform Commission. And through that, excuse me, I'm Greek, so sometimes I roll my R's in funny ways. So through the Reform Commission, we realized that just looking at the finances and the DNC membership, that half of the members of the DNC had conflicts of interest. They weren't working class people. They were lobbyists. They were non-racist, not overtly racist Republicans. They were Bloomberg types. I mean, don't forget, this is the party complaining that Bernie Sanders wasn't a Democrat, yet they had no problem putting Republicans on the stage at the DNC, putting Bloomberg on the stage at the DNC, where we in the front row were screaming out, Mayor 1%. This is a party who's
a literal billionaire.
Multiple billionaires were on stage at the convention. And, their idea was a flawed idea that there was this middle America that was conservative and would vote for a woman and would, let's ignore all the working class people. They decided not to go to Wisconsin. They decided not to go to spend resources in Pennsylvania. I remember on Election Day, I was in Philadelphia, and I was there, before for Obama's race. And, if you recall, there were lines out the door for Obama.
Oh, yeah.
And I would go to these, I was covering the race, so I was going to different polling sites, and I'd ask them, so what was the line like this morning? They said, well, it wasn't that long. I guess we're expecting it to be later, long later in the afternoon. Day was beautiful. It wasn't raining. People weren't showing up. And it's because the Democrats did not invest in traditionally working class places. And they took it for granted that, when we were on the platform committee, one of the things that we complained is we said Hillary Clinton will lose if she doesn't deal with a couple of issues. Number one, TPP. These voters, it's not that they're going to go and vote for Donald Trump. Some did, but not as many as they say. It's that they're going to stay home.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about working class issues, if you don't talk about the environment, fracking, the day that we passed a no fracking ban in the Democratic Party platform with the Hillary delegates, the next day, Secretary Clinton went to Colorado and had her largest fundraiser with the biggest fracking executive. So it's just, they treat working people like they don't have Google, like they don't understand, pocketbook issues. And that's just not true. And as a result, they just rise up.
And I can't think of any group that has to care more about pocketbook issues than the working class. Yeah. Rich people don't have to care. If they lose their pocketbook, so to speak, it's fine. Right. But when you're worried about putting food on the table, or even you have food on the table, you worry about paying your house note. These are not issues that are of a delicacy. These are things that are very, very important. Does it bother you not only that there was this kind of lack of integrity, but also this undeserved arrogance that not only that we've got it all figured out, and then you didn't have it figured out, and you blew what should have been this is a dream opponent. I mean, they should have been easily been able to run the table on him in many ways.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there was an article in a couple of weeks after the election in November. I think it was beginning of December, and it was written by the Daily Beast. And the title of the article, can I swear?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. They didn't fucking listen to us was the title of the article. And it was a quote from me, actually, in which I talked to this reporter, and a few of my colleagues did, and we said that we had sat down with the Clinton campaign and told them just that if we know, because we've been out there on the ground, we were going across to several states. They wanted the Bernie people, and they thought just having Bernie on stage with Hillary was enough. They thought Elizabeth Warren was enough. They wanted all of us, all the surrogates, the people who were out there with names campaigning for Bernie, they wanted all of us to endorse Hillary. It's not like you can just slap on a hashtag and put somebody in a new outfit and suddenly everyone's going to follow them. That's what they didn't understand, is that voters are not pawns. In a Democratic Party machine, traditionally the majority of voters do kind of follow the leader. But Bernie's supporters were the voters who've just been checked out of the Democratic Party for a while.
Oh, yeah.
He brought them in. And then they suddenly were supposed to move over to Hillary Clinton, and she wasn't going to change her policies. So I think
even acknowledge them in any, there wasn't even welcome aboard. We had a tough fight. I'm glad you guys are here. You know what I mean? It was you're not on the list kind of thing. This Mean Girls thing.
It was. I remember saying that on CNN to ended up being one of the Hillary delegates, super delegates. And she's still a CNN contributor. And I just said, what is this, the Mean Girls?
Yeah.
You're at the cool kids table? That's not how you win elections.
There's nothing cooler than Hillary Clinton, that's for sure, and her dank memes. So here's the big. So one of the things you said, I'm sure you wouldn't mind me repeating this. One of the things I always point out to my listeners and people who follow me on Twitter is there's this idea from each side that the other side is a monolith and they all agree. Mm. And I asked you, I said, how do the Democrats look at Hillary? Is it like the Republicans look at Romney? Do you remember this?
No.
And you had said, you go, no, it's much worse. And you said something like 90% of college kids were for Bernie, and this is a core Democratic constituency. So you need to understand there is an enormous amount of antipathy towards this woman. And this is before the election. Right. And that was a very revelatory thing for me to hear, because so many people think, okay, push comes to shove, all the Democrats are the same, or push comes to shove, all the Republicans are the same. And if you think about it for 3 seconds, every group has infighting, even if they do all agree on everything, because you're going to have infighting over personalities. But these are infighting over extremely important issues.
Right. And it's interesting because I've been talking about this a little bit in the last few weeks, although I'm campaigning, so there's not much presidential talk. But a reporter asked me, who do you think is, other than Bernie Sanders, who else has a potential to beat Donald Trump? And I said, I would love for Elizabeth Warren. I would love for that to be an option. I would love for even some other candidates to be. That is a sign of a strong Democratic Party. But unfortunately, the only candidate who's going to be able to beat Donald Trump is the candidate who has a movement behind him or her. Yeah. Someone who's able to mobilize and energize millions of people who understand the issues and inspire.
Right.
Because what Donald Trump has, that the Democrats cannot have, because we have a class of Democrats who are making money off of the infrastructure of the Democratic Party. What the Republicans have and Donald Trump has is, he split a multi-way primary up, right?
Yes.
I'm running in a multi-way race, so I can speak from the heart right now, personal experience. When you have several candidates, you can kind of divide and conquer. And that's what he did. And then he won. And he's still, if you remember Mitch McConnell, if you remember Lindsey Graham, if you remember all these guys, they hated him more than anybody. And now they've fallen in line because at the end of the day, they got their tax breaks.
Yeah.
And the Republican Party.
And the Supreme Court nominee.
So he has the Republican Party now going into 2020, which he didn't have in 2016. Right. And he has a very crazy movement that I think is not as large as it was before. Some of it was real movement people. Some of it was a little bit manufactured through, messaging. And if you want to go there with Russia or whoever was buying the ads, there was some manufactured side of it. He's not going to have that in 2020, but he has the machine. We, as a party, Democratic Party, have a very broken machine that doesn't work. And the machine that does exist, because there's some technical rules that, that still have to happen. The DNC membership, who decides how the primary is going to be played out, that's still, the majority is they're people who have conflicts of interest. We tried to get rid of that in the commission, and they played a lot of process games that I don't think were abiding by the DNC's rules, but that's how they do these tricks, backroom deals, that are going to block Bernie. But at the end of the day, if they don't have Bernie, we're not winning.
Right.
That's not rhetoric. That's just the truth.
Yeah,
Nobody
just like
has the movement.
When they nominated Romney and McCain, all those Tea Party people sat home.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something about back to the local politics. Yeah. Mayor de Blasio had this idea, and at first I was like, oh my God, this is insane. Then I'm like, I kind of love it because he's trolling people, and I want to know what your take is. There's something called Billionaires Row, and it is Central Park South, and this is the most expensive real estate in New York City. It's exorbitant. Money from all over the world, people buy to invest. It's just crazy expensive. He decided on Billionaires Row he's going to put a homeless shelter. And his point was, why is it that only poor neighborhoods should have a homeless shelter? This should be fairly and equally. So we're going to put it here. And at first I was like, oh my God, is this something you think is a good idea?
We have a homeless crisis in the city. And I think in some ways it's a brilliant idea because most of those homes are unoccupied. They're owned by foreign oligarchs who are using it as their little Cayman Islands. There's huge tax deals for people who purchase properties here as investments to store their cash because it's not safe in banks or frankly, it's illegal cash, whatever their mechinism is, because it might be seized by their government back home.
Or inflation back home, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Hedge, yeah.
So, they're purchasing all over the world. They're doing in London, San Francisco, but New York, it's a big problem because we have a real estate crisis. So they're buying up the real estate that we have vacant. It's not being occupied, or if it is, it's, while a kid is in school and college. It's very minimally occupied. And it's a majority of real estate being purchased right now. And then here's just an anecdote. A friend of mine lives in one of the most expensive landmark real estate places in New York City. A supporter. Crazy supporter of mine. Couldn't understand. I was like, why are you're a billionaire,
right,
whose family made money in real estate. Like, why are you supporting me? And she's not in real estate, but she's an activist against REBNY, which is the Real Estate Board of New York. And she told me, she said, my family's owned this place for years. Our taxes are going up, but it's not going up, and the cost of real estate is going up, but I have no neighbors. She said, I got in the elevator the other day and there was somebody in the elevator and I couldn't believe it. And I said, what do you mean? She says, I have no neighbors. All the apartments are owned. Every single one of them. They're not paying taxes. They're driving up the cost of her real estate. So when the billionaires are upset about the cost of living in New York, you have a problem. Now, that's obviously not what I'm running on, but I think that it is a brilliant way to troll. We have a housing crisis. We have an affordable housing crisis in the city. But I think what's inauthentic is that it's coming from Bill de Blasio, who has cozied up to real estate developers, as every single elected official in this city has. And it's such a tragedy at this point because the cost, for those of you who don't live in New York, it's not just housing that's astronomically high. You have NYCHA, which is the public housing in New York. 1 in 8 New Yorkers lives there. That's almost the size of Boston. They're dealing with a rat infestation, mold, toxic mold, asthma issues, leaky roofs, lead poisoning, no hot water, no heat. And this public housing it's $30 billion in debt. And I think a lot of that comes from, same thing with the MTA, a lot of it comes from a lack of, a failure of developers paying taxes. They have huge tax incentives, deregulation over the last 40 years. And when they don't pay taxes, that's when our MTA fares go up. That's when we're illegally evicted from our apartments because they get, they're buying up real estate left and right in the city and then selling it to oligarchs. So
how
the cost goes up on us.
How would you fix the housing crisis if you had the power to do so?
It's such a big question.
Yeah.
It's a huge. I mean, I wrote 35 pages in one of my questionnaires just about this issue, and I still didn't have it, which you can find online. So I think the first thing is to go after these developers. I mean, the developers are.
But what does go after mean?
So this is a position that's the watchdog of the city, and my training is as an investigative reporter. I was trained by a man named Wayne Barrett, who was a very famous investigative reporter in New York City. He notably did so much investigative reporting that led to change. Many lawmakers, including the comptroller of New York State, was imprisoned due to his reporting. So for those who say the public advocate's office is not powerful, it's about who you put in office.
Right.
I think, I'll give you...
Did the last public advocate become attorney general too?
Yes, just recently, yes. And I don't know. I mean, there's a debate over whether or not it should be an attorney's position. Listen, there's 1 million attorneys in New York. We have more attorneys than anywhere else on the planet. Doesn't mean that they're all able to do investigative work.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that they can't try, but it's not the Attorney General's office. It's not the U.S. Attorney's office. It's the Public Advocate's office, and it has investigative powers. I think that the Department of Investigations should be housed in the Public Advocate's office, and I say that because there was just a huge scandal in which the head of that office had to resign, but he was a donor to Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio fired him, but that was after he had appointed him because he was a donor of his. Why is that connected to the mayor's office? So this is, in terms of real estate, you have situations like this all over the city. People who are running city agencies coming from the real estate world. The MTA board, several members of the MTA board, everybody complains about the subway, and deservedly so, because it's a wreck. But the MTA board, you have real estate developers who don't live in New York City. One of them admitted, this guy Larry Schwartz, he admitted that he had never taken a bus. And he is in charge of fixing the MTA's problems. So you have to ask yourself, why are these folks being put on the MTA board? Why is it that NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority, why are they having closed-door meetings when that's against the law? And in the closed-door meetings, we learn, because of a reporter, that they had hired a law firm from outside the state to cover up discrimination lawsuits and the lead crisis, which has now affected children who are in kindergarten have developmental issues. So that's a kind of, it's really investigative reporting 101. But if you have a platform and if you have, 80 people on your staff, you can do real serious damage.
Infinite CBD has the cleanest, healthiest, and purest form of CBD available. CBD has become more popular. Yeah, you see it everywhere. It's in drinks, it's in this and that. And you know why? It's because it works. It gives you the benefits of marijuana without getting high. They sent us some of their stuff to sample. The PM pills, it's CBD and melatonin to help you go to sleep. Now, usually when you just take melatonin, you are sleeping, you're not getting good sleep, you wake up drowsy. With the PM pills, you wake up feeling rested. They've got the topical cream, freezing point topical cream. It reduces inflammation. It's great on sore muscles or anything that hurts. And then you got the PM pills, you also have the AM pills. It's CBD and caffeine, helps you get work done. It's the absolute highest quality CBD in the market. They've got this double extraction method, and the end result is that the products are over 99% CBD. Other companies use the oil. They don't use the oil. This is pure CBD concentrate, and it's the highest quality CBD product you can get, and it helps people who have chronic pain, inflammation, anxiety, and more. 42% of CBD users have stopped using traditional medications, according to studies. So if you go to infinitecbd.com and use promo code WELCOME15, they're going to give you 15% off. That's infinitecbd.com, promo code WELCOME15 for 15% off. Do you think this is kind of inevitable when you have effectively one-party rule in city council? Many of these candidates are running unopposed, or there's marginal opposition. So as a result, they have no incentive really to speak to their constituents or speak for them.
Yes and no. I think a lot of them do get challenged, and I think it's easier sometimes to challenge people in primaries for many reasons. But in New York City, for city council is different than Congress. For congressional races, essentially the county committee, if there's an opening, which there's a lot of in New York, it's not like an every once in a while thing. I think there were like 6 or 7 last year because of corruption, because people went to jail, because they move up to other offices. Because my position is a special election. This office, this election is a special election because Letitia James was running to fill Eric Schneiderman's seat. Eric Schneiderman notably had a horrible, horrible Me Too story.
Right.
He said his Me Too stories and domestic violence. So, in that case, it's the county committee that makes the decision on their own about who's going to fill the vacancy. Joe Crowley, the head of the Queens Democratic Party, still the Democratic Party boss, he was put into his congressional position because his boss retired, and then he just basically was given that spot. He didn't have to go through a primary. So, that type of machine-style politics still exists. It's much weaker than it used to be, and different parts of the city are stronger. I would say for city council, it's a little bit different. I think, for the most part, we still have very low turnout in New York.
Right.
Some of it by design, some of it, in our race, it's going to be in the middle of February, the special election. So some of these people get into office in special elections. I don't think it's, I honestly think a lot of folks know more about city council than you'd imagine. We just have low turnout. It depends on who the city council member is and what their district's like. But, if you look at the Upper West Side, people know who their city council member is. They know who their assembly person is and their state senator. Very engaged, set of voters. It just depends on where you are.
So here's another question. Like, one of the things that I've seen happen in the subway is there have been increasing numbers of homeless people, and they'll have like all their stuff with them, and they're basically set up camp, and hopefully they're unhygienic or whatever. At the same time, I'm not here to, obviously this person's not doing so hot, so I'm not here to point fingers, but what do you do with a situation like that?
Well, there's multiple. So this is where the Democratic Socialist comes in. Of course, we need to build more homeless shelters. And the city has a ton of vacant real estate where we could build affordable housing for people who need affordable housing, where we could build homeless shelters. What the mayor is doing is he's taking
Wait, but
hotels.
if you're homeless, no housing is affordable.
Right.
These people don't have...
I'm saying separate.
Yeah,
so it's two separate issues. So affordable housing is a crisis, and we have a lot of land where we could be building affordable housing. But then there's also... the homeless shelters, he's putting them in old hotels or new hotels that have been the city's bought. It's still not enough. That's just for immediate care. I think the bottom line, the reason why I am going after real estate and nobody else in this race is, people say, oh, I'm a tenants activist. It's like, meanwhile, you're taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from developers, or you've rezoned your neighborhood. Okay, enough with that. New Yorkers are smart, and the people who are going to turn out in this election are really aware. When it comes down to what makes this city unaffordable, what makes the coffee that I just bought, no joke, $6. It's the small business on East 7th Street that's rent is going up. They're not charging me $6 because they want to. It's because their rent is too damn high. And it's because we have this developer issue. We have small businesses unable to the city banks and Dwayne Reeds are taking up corners because they're real estate assets for them to hold that piece of land.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Is that why these banks are everywhere?
They're everywhere. And they're all, they're just tellers. It's like empty space. Maybe there's 2 people there.
Right.
If you're lucky. So it's a real estate asset for them. And then the Dwayne Reeds, multinational corporations are who can afford, to rent from these places, or, in rarity, they can actually purchase it. But to go back to homelessness, what this does is we have an economic crisis here. The wages, yes, we just got $15 an hour in New York City. It's not adjusted for inflation. And $15 in New York City is nothing. That's actually poverty. But in New York City, that is poverty. In fact, nationwide, The Guardian, the New York Times, and other publications have said not one person can live in a one-bedroom apartment nationwide off of $15 an hour. So something else that I'm pushing, other than going after real estate, is I'm calling for a $30 minimum wage in New York City. And it's for understanding the concerns of small businesses and the fact that their rent is so high. It's for businesses that have over 75 employees to start, right? Businesses who get huge tax breaks, and for all municipal employees. So that, I think, it's still not enough. At the end of the day, after taxes, that's like $46,000 or so. You know, if you live in New York, you can survive off of that if you're a single person, but can you raise a family off of $46,000? No.
So, but here's the thing. If I'm McDonald's and now you're telling me the minimum wage is 30, why wouldn't I replace all my employees with kiosks?
Well, and that's a real serious question. I think for big corporations like that, that would have to be a national, I mean, they have test markets. I actually think they're doing it already. It's not.
Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah, they already are. So, you know, I think we should be pushing back, and that's where unions, I think, need to be empowered more. But that's not all of the labor force in New York. If you automate everything in New York, you know, we have empty buildings and everything is automated. There's no New York left. There's no. I mean, that's literally. I was driving over. I live in Queens. I used to live in Lower East Side down here, and then I was priced out of a co-op that I lived in. It was sold. My rent went up $1,000. I had to find another apartment.
Oh my God.
True story. Rent went up $1,000. Went to Queens, got an apartment for $400 more a month, and it's smaller than the apartment I had on the Lower East Side, and it's on the first floor. And I'm probably giving away my first floor is somewhere in Queens.
Yeah.
But I was driving over the bridge a few nights ago, and I looked at the city coming from Manhattan into Queens, and I looked at the city. And the lights weren't on, and it wasn't late at night. It was like 6 o'clock in the evening because it gets dark. And it wasn't just businesses. I was thinking, this is a city where people can't live anymore. The lights aren't on. And like, who are we as a city if, you know, we don't have our lights on, if that famous skyline is not lit up anymore?
So how many candidates are in this race?
There's a lot. I actually don't know what the latest number is. I think it's over 20.
Okay.
Right now, we're all petitioning to get on the ballot.
Okay.
So I think at the end of the day, I mean, don't hold me to this because I have no idea, but at most we have 10. At minimum, we have maybe 6. It's a crowded field. You have several elected officials. I think probably what's going to, well, I shouldn't say this, but I'm likely to be the only one or of a couple of non-elected officials. But in terms of name ID, I probably have stronger name ID than many of the elected officials nationwide, media-wise.
Yeah, I've seen you on Tucker.
Yeah.
I've been on shows with you, but I've seen you with Cynthia Nixon, who was the candidate for a Democrat against Governor Cuomo, who you must be a big fan of, I'm guessing. With Linda Sarsour, I've seen you with AOC. So that side of the Democratic Party, there's two scenarios. One is this is the future of the Democratic Party. Another is this is the Tea Party times 2. Again, the left version, it's going to have a moment and then it's going to fizzle away. And I think the establishment does not like change. It doesn't like that spunky young girl who comes here and is going to mix things up. Yeah. They want, no, we've been doing this our way. It works for us. We don't want things to change. So I'm sure that's a concern that's what's happening. It's the second one for you.
I think it's interesting because New York is different. New York City is different than New York State.
Oh, sure. Of course.
We have campaign finance laws here that are stronger than anywhere else in the country. They're not perfect. I'm noticing all the loopholes that if I were elected as public advocate, I would immediately start to advocate to fix those loopholes. I think if there couldn't be this is the best election for someone like me to run in and actually have a real shot. I think Mayor de Blasio, if he's like the kingmaker, which he's not in this race, if he were, I think there are other people he probably doesn't want more than me. I'm not saying that he wants me, but there are probably other folks. Governor Cuomo, same thing. I think I couldn't imagine him wanting me after the things I've said about him.
He is a terrible person.
Yeah.
I mean, I just tweeted that out when people were complaining that Elizabeth Warren was being called unlikable and they're saying this is a gendered attack. I go, Cuomo is 10 times, 100 times. I don't think she's unlikable particularly. Worse than her. I mean, he's alienated everybody.
He's
needlessly
a tactician.
Okay.
He's Machiavellian.
It's amazing that the governor who put over gay marriage democratically, the first one to do it, still basically has no shot at getting his party's nomination in 2020.
Well, and I think the problem with that is he's been using that as a weapon, and this is what he does. It's Cuomo's multidimensional politics. People finally figured it out. But I actually recommend people read the biography on Cuomo, not because it's just a fascinating political read. It's to learn about how he came about. His father was, more or less a progressive champion. Definitely not as much as we'd wished, but way, way, way more and authentically so than Governor Cuomo is, this Governor Cuomo. And my former mentor, Wayne Barrett, used to say, I said, well, why is it that Mario is so different than Andrew? And he goes, well, Andrew was raised by his grandfather.
Oh,
and his grandfather was a mobster.
Wow.
Supposedly, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to get sued by governor. He doesn't care about me. He won't sue me. He'll just find another way to come after me.
Yeah.
But it does. There's a style of governing that he has that is unique to any other Democrat. He's incredibly intelligent. I think he is somebody to watch in the Democratic election. Everyone's like, oh, he's not going to do well in Iowa. It doesn't matter. John Kerry, Al Gore, were these faces that you thought would do well in Iowa and that didn't, became the nominee. Andrew Cuomo, when he wants to be charming, he can be very charming. He has locked up a lot of the DNC membership, and I know that just from following.
But you think he's going to run?
Oh, yeah.
In 2020?
Oh, totally. He's sitting on $30 million. Where's that going to go? He could move that into a super PAC and then, do the Hillary
Because after he was reelected, he said he's definitely not running.
Oh, right. Because Andrew Cuomo's never lied before.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah. Okay.
He'll be like, oh, the people told me. Did you ever see that video of him where he's like, the Latinos, the gays, the Muslims, I am.
Yeah,
he said it over and over. Yeah, that's what he'll do.
Wow. Okay. So do you think this is just a moment in the Democratic Party? Or do you think this is the beginning of a big change in where the party's going?
I hope it's the beginning of a big change. I mean, at the end of the day, they have money and we have people.
Yeah.
I think what's keeping the centrist Democrats in our party is the crazy man on the Republican Party. So, I mean, and it's probably smart for the Republicans too, right? They don't want the centrist Democrats, not because they don't like them, but if the Democratic Party becomes purely working class and isn't controlled by a couple of centrists, then the Republican Party becomes the wealthy few.
Yeah.
So it's actually great for centrists, special interests, big business to have the controllers of the party to be big business, and then they control their working people who have different social and maybe even economic theories. So I think for us, how we're different than the Tea Party is the Tea Party, the ideologies of the Tea Party infiltrated the Republican Party, and the Republican Party, it still has a very pro-business, it's openly pro-business. I think with the Democratic Party, the actual the people who took control of the party and took it off its course were the DLC. And once people, even in the DNC membership, I remember during the DNC chairs race, which I don't think Tom Perez won. I think Keith Ellison won it. There's some shady stuff that happened in the process. But when we looked at the membership, people who had voted for Hillary were voting for Keith Ellison because at the end of the day, they were union leaders. They were folks who really just wanted working class issues. The actual DNC membership is people who are activists and union leaders and organizers, and then consultants who make money off the DNC. And so the reason why they fought me I had a conflicts of interest clause that I was trying to get passed in the DNC Reform Commission, and they fought and fought and fought, and then somehow it got eliminated, and then we're bringing it back. And the reason why is if you ban the conflicts of interest, it becomes a party ruled by the people.
What do you think... do you find any humor in what Trump does?
At this point, no.
Okay, how about this? Don't you think, are you going to be able to appreciate on some level, we're going to be passing what I'm looking forward to is uncharted territory, which is when the Democratic primaries are going on, we will have a president in the White House live tweeting and calling them out, and with ridiculous things and some things not ridiculous. And they're going to have to figure out, how do I deal with my competitors, but also with the sitting president who's tweeting at me in real time. There's no guidebook for this.
That's right. And again, that's
It's
why
going to be
I think
hilarious.
Bernie's the best choice because have you ever noticed how he debates people? And when he goes on air, he's a much smarter messenger than people give him credit for. He's not, AOC charismatic. He doesn't have this, and really nobody does in the Democratic Party. Beto definitely doesn't. I don't know why people are obsessed with him.
He's a loser. No, but I'm not. But I mean,
all right, Donald.
But I don't understand
He's
how
a
you go
loser.
from losing a Senate race to running for president. That makes no sense to me.
Against, Ted Cruz. Listen,
Was it Mitch McConnell? Lindsey Graham tweeted out, "Congratulations, you spent the most money to lose to the most unliked member of the Senate." One of them.
wait, they did not write that.
I don't remember who it
Graham.
was, but maybe it was a pundit. But I was like, yeah.
That's exactly it. If you can't beat that guy in Texas and you had a lot of money, it wasn't
The most.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And support from all over the country.
Yep, and that's that's another thing that's frustrating to me. These candidates are so consultant built that they get it in their heads that they can be president. And the consultants, I've seen it in our mini campaigns, New York City. It's not that many.
Yeah.
But in our campaign, where maybe 5% of the vote turns out, I'm noticing all these consultants are, getting in people's ears. Like, oh, see, I can hear their speeches change overnight.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, the consultants are around them now. I have no consultants. I have like friends of mine who I've hired. But that's what happens on the presidential level is, on November 9th, let's say, consultants went to Tom Steyer and said, Tom Steyer, who has billions of dollars, you can be president. And Tom Steyer is like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. What a great plan. Here's your plan. And the next thing you know, he's buying commercials and these consultants are making money.
Right.
And so...
You know what it's like, I think? Yeah. It's like those ads in the 80s or 90s where they tell everyone they could be a model.
Yeah.
And you pay that photographer $1,000 to get your modeling portfolio, and they've got all these connections, and it's like someone at the mall.
Yes!
And it's like, I promise you're not going to be a model. And that's fine. You don't have to be a model. Just like it's okay to just be governor.
So
you don't have to be president. But that's the same thing.
Yeah.
They're making sure they get paid.
That is hilarious, and it's perfect. I think someone should do a commercial, like a little video of that commercial. Because it's exactly the same. And they're delusional. They're preying on people's narcissism. Politicians are often in bubbles where the only people who are talking to them, who walk up to them, rarely do they get, it happens, but rarely do they get called out for their crap. So it's interesting. And in our race, I mean, sorry to bring it back to us,
no,
but
please do.
But it just shows how prevalent this is in politics. In our race, there are people in the race who are legitimately running because they want to bring up an issue and they don't think they're going to win. And that's great. I think that's wonderful. But there are also people who consultants have said, get your name out, use this to get your name out. You may not win or you may win. And I think at the end of the day, that doesn't always help democracy. It's good to have debate if it's about issues. If there was an activist who was a very strong criminal justice reform activist, and if there was a campaign finance reform activist, and if there was a women's rights activist, or somebody who understood the environment more than anybody else, I would love to see the debate of ideas at the New York City's public advocate. But at the end of the day, it's like 7 hacks and then like some random people, including myself, who decided to run, but for different motives. And when you have matching funds, which is what we have in the city, if you can hit the threshold, $62,500, they gave us the number just a couple of weeks ago, and you have to raise $250 or less from New York City donors, a total of $62,500 and beyond, and then you get 8-1 from the city. So consultants are like, oh, what?
Wait, so you raise 60, you get 480?
It's more. It's for every dollar you raise, you get $8 more.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's and it's tough because the people who can raise, I have a large social media following, we're raising money, but it's still hard because I don't have a Rolodex where I can just go one by one and say, hey, so-and-so, can you give me $250? My friends are activists. They're like,
that's good. Like that, it took me a long time to get on Patreon.
Yeah.
Because I felt gross asking people for money,
right.
And people actually kept tweeting at me this. It sounds so surreal. They're like, how can I support you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Right.
What's it like? I mean, have you hit the phones and asked for money?
Oh my God, yes.
I mean, don't you feel weird? Like, how do you do it? Like psychologically? Psychologically,
I think what's different about our campaign as opposed to others, and it is going to be harder. we are not taking any corporate money. We're not taking any real estate developer money or real estate industry money, meaning the way that there are loopholes people use is they say, oh, we're not taking corporate money because you have in the city, you can't if you're doing matching funds. But what they'll take is the developer's CEO's money or their sister's money or their brother's money. And they have
developers
Rolodex.
know how to work around these rules. Come on. Yeah.
People with, corporations know how to work, and these politicians do. So for us, it's really interesting to see the overlap between our volunteers and our donors. They're the same people. And that reminds me of the Bernie campaign. The people who are literally invested in the campaign also were investing in time. I call up folks and I ask them to volunteer and they say, I can't, I have 2 jobs, I can't do it, but let me contribute $100 today, or let me contribute $50 today. Or I call up, we have a volunteer list and I'll say, can you come and petition for us? And it's the same thing. It's like, I'm going to call my brother up and see if he can, or I don't have any money, but I'm going to, send out this link. And so there's a social media movement happening. And as a result, we have, I think at this point, over 1,500 supporters, donors in our campaign from small dollars. And I know for a fact that our opponents don't have that. They might have more money. They may have more $250 donations, but we have more activist donations, not just from New York City, but from all over the country, because, people all over the country want to help however they can. And that's wonderful.
Walk me through what a day in the life of a candidate is like, because this seems like it's brutal.
Yeah. Well, this is a special election, so it's a little bit more brutal, I'd say, than normal.
Because this is all about turnout. And I mean, when you're dealing with such a small turnout and getting your people out. Yeah.
It's also a very short time period. And this special election in particular is strange.
When's the day of the election?
February 26th.
Okay.
They just announced the date about a week ago.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. But we've all been, I've been campaigning for a while.
Right.
It was tough because you had an election in November. And then immediately after the election, everybody was exhausted.
Right, of course.
And then we went into the holidays. And so maybe there was a week in December where you could actively, there were a bunch of forums all over the city. They went to the holidays, came back from the holidays, and they announced the date. And immediately all the candidates went into petitioning and raising money to get the matching funds simultaneously. That doesn't normally happen. Usually there's a buildup, you raise money, you can get petitioners. So how our opponents are, I think, using loopholes. I don't know if it's legal. They're still yet to be determined. Some of them are using funds from previous accounts that they had raised through matching funds, their city council accounts, so they can immediately hire staff. We had to raise money very, very, very quickly. And that's why we announced in September. It was a slow growth, but now I feel, we're feeling the momentum. A day in the life, I would say, is, this morning we're petitioning. This morning I woke up very, very, very early. 5:30. I had a meeting at 6:00 with 2 members of our team because I was going to go out there and petition for a couple of hours. I like to do mornings. It's just,
What does that mean, petitioning?
So the petition process is where you have a period of time set by the city, changes in every election, that you can get a certain number of signatures to get on the ballot. Now, we are shooting for more than that because you have opponents who will probably try to take you off the ballot, or some signatures aren't valid. They have the wrong address. They, spell their name wrong. It's not legible. So we have a slew of volunteers, maybe over 100 volunteers who are going around the city and collecting signatures so that we can get on the ballot. So in the morning, what I've been doing is going to subway stations. I was in Union Square this morning, just asking people for signatures. Because when it's a candidate, it's legal, And what's interesting is there are all these people I think it's really weird when you realize, okay, I'm running for office, and some people know you're running for office. When the message is out and you haven't even started really, really advertising it. That's really cool. I had a guy actually last night. Somebody endorsed me on Twitter. He's an actor, and he was at the Whole Foods maybe an hour ago, and he said, "Hey, know me?" And he's like, "It's Raviv." I'm like, "Oh my God, you just endorsed me on Twitter yesterday. This is real life. This is great." And he signed my petition. So that's the morning. And then sometimes I'll do some media. I usually do a few hours of phone calls where I'll call supporters.
Hours?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll just sit in a room and I will, I'll call volunteers. I'll call supporters. I will be given a list of, different progressives that I think, if I could convince them to vote. A lot of people don't know about the election day, so I try to do a lot of person-to-person outreach. And what I've noticed is people will share it on social media. That's not the intent. It just sort of happened. They'll say, "Oh my God, Nomiki Konst called me." It's not a recording.
Right.
I can't call everybody in the city, but That's the start. And then almost every day we have a forum somewhere in the city where a community group, an organization, a Democratic club, they'll invite a good chunk of the candidates. Sometimes it's all the candidates. Sometimes they select who they think are the main candidates. And we will take questions from their groups. Sometimes it's more of a debate format. Sometimes it's for an endorsement. A lot of these endorsements are political, so they're locked up ahead of time.
Yeah.
But it's still good to get in front of these groups and talk. And I was in Co-op City yesterday in the Bronx. And right after that, I went to a birthday party for my council member. So they're long days, very, very long days.
Are people ever obnoxious to you? They must be when you're like asking them for their vote or sign a petition. Or are they?
I haven't really had
You're lucky.
that.
Oh, that's great.
I think, the worst I get is yesterday someone said, I have not had my coffee yet. Please don't talk to me.
All right.
But that's not.
That's fair.
Yeah. Listen.
Yeah, we can relate.
That's me.
Yeah.
I've seen others get trolled real hard. Yeah, of course, there's some nasty stuff happening behind the scenes and even a little bit more publicly. But in terms of my positions, I think my positions are furthest to the left. And by left, I mean, this is New York. So we're all social. Well, I shouldn't say that. Not everybody's socially left
Right.
In our race. But in terms of economics, I mean, that's the stuff that really sets me apart from others. People say I'm a tenants' rights activist or I'm an organizer, but at the end of the day, they're taking money from the people who are making lives hard for tenants all over the city.
Here's the big question. If you're going to go after developers and take more of their money, right? Tax them, whatever. Aren't they just going to pass that on to the people that they're selling to? And won't that just cause the cost of everything to increase?
No, I mean, for a lot of reasons. We finally have a state senate that's Democratic. And so I think we're expecting simultaneously. This is why I really think there's a moment here where we could do some real work. Where the rent laws are up next year. So you're going to see, or this year, it's 2019. You're going to see rent stabilization and regulation of the real estate industry at the forefront. The Senate and the Assembly just went into session. Everyone's being sworn in. This is a huge issue. The deputy leader of the Senate, Michael Gianaris, who's my senator, he has been very active against the IDC. He was active against the IDC. He has pledged. He's the head of the Democratic Party caucus, the political committee for the Democrats. He has pledged not to take real estate money.
Oh, okay.
And that is, for a leader in the Senate to not take real estate money is huge. So there's something happening. I think it's, I do my part and then they do their part in making sure that the regulations are in place so that they don't put the burden on the tax. And they, they don't set the taxes either way. So,
guys, there's this great app I want to talk to you about. And in fact, I am speaking from experience because I did a pilot to do something that's similar to this app. And it's a great, great idea that someone actually did. It's called Blinkist. Here's how Blinkist works. And you're going to use the promo code Blinkist.com/malice for free 7-day trial. Now, you have all these books, these audiobooks. What it does is it condenses these books into 15 minutes. The best takeaways, the need-to-know information. This is from thousands of nonfiction books. You can use it when driving the car, making breakfast. You're basically getting the whole book like the Reader's Digest, the Cliff Notes in 15 minutes. Thousands of books on there. If you go to Blinkist.com/malice, you get a free 7-day trial. Here are Blinkist. Here are some of the books that they have that are popular right now. The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Carnegie. See, if you listen to it, you would know how to pronounce it correctly. How to Win Friends and Influence People, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Fire and Fury, the Michael Wolff book. They've got everything. Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. If you go to Blinkist.com/malice, you get a 7-day trial and you can listen to thousands of books in a quarter of the time. So as public advocate, what do you think of the job de Blasio is doing in general?
It's complicated. I think he's, on so many issues, he's very progressive. Today he came out for Medicare for All for the city. It's huge. It's transformative. We're the first major city in America who could get that done, and we're the largest city in the country. So to have Medicare...
And the population in New York City is bigger than many states.
Yes. It's 8 million, not counting, the people who work in the city.
Right.
And city employees as well that don't live in the city but work in the city. So that's transformative. He's incredibly close to real estate developers. And
Wait, don't you think that's ironic that someone who
Yeah.
basically was in many ways almost a commie, now like these are, I mean, if you talk about like we're gonna get really left, talk about Marx, like the real estate people are the villain, like they're the ones who are squeezing the working man. Right. So the irony of him with that, I'm just using this term broadly, having that background to be in bed with how does that even happen?
I think what is it, all power corrupts all?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, in some ways I think he's a product of a time where he wasn't in a place where he could stay true to his values like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was, living in Vermont. He ran like 95 times before he won his mayorship. And then he, ran for Congress, and he finally, he won, and then he ran for Senate, and he could do that in Vermont. I don't know if you've ever been to Vermont, but I was in Vermont a couple of weeks ago at the Sanders Institute, and I pulled over at a rest stop at an Exxon or something, and the bathroom was compost. I'm seriously, they composted the toilet. I'd never seen anything like this in my life before. They were selling gluten-free dog treats.
God, this is horrible.
In the Exxon.
I'd rather be in North Korea.
Is an incredible place. Now I understand it.
Oh my God.
So that's how Bernie.
Oh God, it's so gross.
So in a lot of ways, he was the product of his environment.
Right.
He was in HUD. What's really interesting is, talk about this housing crisis. You have the mayor who worked at HUD. You have Senator Gillibrand, who worked at HUD, and you have the governor, who was the head of HUD, all at the same time. They were at HUD at the same time, and they're now in leadership in the three of the most powerful positions in the country, and yet they can't understand how to fix housing. Well, it's real estate. So I think when it comes to the NYPD, he is incredibly weak, and it's just, he doesn't know how to negotiate, and he's afraid. I don't know if that's necessarily where his intent is. I'm not in his heart.
Right.
A ton of criticism there in terms of how we prosecute members of the police department who've literally murdered people.
Yeah, well, you're singing my anarchist song. Me and the police do not even get me started. Actually, I went to Laura Loomer. I'm sure you know who she is. Do you know her? Mm-mm. She's a right-wing activist. She's the one who yells at Hillary Clinton at the book signings and at Huma and all these other things. Yeah.
I know. She's yelled at me before.
Oh, she has? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I just don't watch her, so.
So she locked herself. She was kicked off of Twitter. And she locked herself to the door of Twitter headquarters recently in New York. And
to Twitter's headquarters?
Yeah. and in very understated Laura style, she put a Jewish Star of David on her arm, because she said, "Why is Louis Farrakhan on the site? I'm not. This is anti-Semitism." So I went to see her, and the cops were, it was very peaceful, very nice. I was live streaming. It was the first time I did a live stream from my phone. And the cops.
Welcome to 2019.
Well, it's more like welcome to 2014. Yeah. The cops were pushing us back, and I did ask the cops if I was being detained. And he's like, "No, you're not being detained." What? And I'm like, "Am I free to go?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why are you asking me these questions?" I go, "I can't speak without an attorney present." And he did not know what to do. But yeah, the police, it's shocking to me and disturbing to me when the left, when the one that really drives me crazy is when the far left is defending the CIA. The CIA?
Wait, who does that? How far left are? Well, that's not DSA left.
No, but I mean, you see it with the Democrats. Like, we have to trust the CIA and the FBI. They're just doing their job.
That's the.
And I'm just sitting there.
Left.
I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you are the ones who, from the start, were like, these people are out to get us, and correctly. So it's great to hear someone not being apologetic for the police.
Oh, I mean. That's the Hillary left. That's the centrist left. And I don't think, my dad's even like that. Like, I love my dad. He's a Bernie Sanders supporter, but he's just, it's very hard to deprogram somebody. And I think that's what's happening with Bill de Blasio. It's like he was programmed by Clintonian politics, and he was like a leftist caught in the world of Clintonian politics. And to shake it off, he can hang out with Bernie Sanders all day long, but at the Sanders Institute where he was, we all protested him on the Amazon deal. It's my neighborhood, to his face. And it was uncomfortable, but he definitely stood out in that crowd of socialists and some anarchists in that room. So I think the real left is not quite the people who watch MSNBC all day and just like listen to Rachel Maddow verbatim.
You were on Tucker not that long ago, arguing about immigration, right?
No, about
what was it?
The Green New Deal.
Oh, okay. So we got a couple of minutes quickly. Yeah. Obviously, this is not part of your race for public advocate. The Green New Deal. Explain to people what it is.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, it is part of my race for public advocate because I think we should pass the same thing in New York City.
Okay.
So it's essentially making sure that fossil fuels pay for the climate change issues related to climate change. Obviously, not everything, but you know, it's finding a solution for our environmental problems through policy. And when we ask, how do you pay for it? The burden goes back to the people who are polluting our planet. And that also produces jobs, whether it's investing in wind and plus investing in solar. Those are job opportunities. And there's tax breaks there, of course. So if a fossil fuel company or a fracking company is legally allowed to do what they do in a state where, like Texas, for instance, they should be paying the taxes on that. And they have tax benefits, right? And those taxes should be going to solving climate change, investing in other sources of climate. That's a basic.
Okay. Historically speaking, this will be our last question. Who has been your favorite Republican? There's got to be people you admire on a personal level, maybe. You got nothing?
No. I think personally, like with a personality,
or any sense.
No. I think this is interesting. Not on policy. I like Meghan McCain a lot.
Okay.
I get along with her. I think she's open for debate. I think she respects anti-establishment folks. She definitely enjoyed debating Bernie with me, and I've talked to her recently about The View and what it's like with Joy Behar, and she's like, Joy and her get along really well. They fight. Fight it out, but Joy is a Bernie Sanders, leftist, and Meghan is her father's child.
Yeah. A Republican leftist.
Yeah, exactly. So I enjoy her. I mean, half of my family's Republican, and it took me many years to get to a place where we could have real debates. And honestly, the Bernie Sanders campaign was revealing. We'd have Thanksgiving dinners, and every year we'd be fighting, and then suddenly it's 2016, the election ends, and my uncle, who's a gun-toting Republican from Arizona, not a Trump supporter though, he goes, I'm really proud of you. And I said, well, why? What do you mean? He's like, well, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders if I could have voted for Bernie Sanders.
I think what works with you is the fact that your first priority isn't carrying water for Hillary Clinton. And once that's the case and you're comfortable criticizing her, Republicans become a lot more receptive because then it's clearly not just about tribalism.
Right.
Because I think there is a lot of tribalism in politics, and it's like when you guys do it, it's bad. When we do it, it's fine, and there's a shamelessness to it, and maybe there's a cognitive dissonance to it as well. So the fact that you're so open to criticize your own party, I think is going to make people more willing to be like, all right, let me hear what she has to say, because she's obviously not just reading some NPC script.
Right. And they do. They send out talking points, and half the talking points don't. Actually, sorry to go on a rant here.
No, please.
In 2015, regretfully, I was on this draft Biden committee. I really didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president. And then the draft Biden committee, ceased to exist. I already decided to be with Bernie. But a friend of mine who was doing messaging with surrogates on Hillary's campaign invited me to an event. And I said, I'm just very curious to see what happens. And I go there, and I open up a book that they had messaging points for people who go on TV, what they say about Hillary. And there was one page on Libya, and I had just returned from Libya the year before, where I was doing campaign trainings for women running for office. And their explanation of what happened in Libya was so inaccurate and so false. So it was not just offensive. It just shows what they're willing to do and what they're willing to script to win.
And how dumb they think people are.
So that was when I said, I can't even be near this. This is disgusting.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, Nomiki Konst, the election is February 26th.
February 26th. Oh, really important.
Yes,
for
please.
your audience, of course.
Yes.
This is a nonpartisan election.
Everyone can vote.
Everybody who's a registered voter in New York City can vote, and none of us have party
affiliation.
Well, we name our own party, and my party is Pay People More.
Okay.
With a little rose symbol.
Oh, that rose. Yeah, I do like that rose symbol on Twitter. It's very useful because then you know who you're dealing with.
Exactly.
So my favorite Democratic Socialist, thank you so much.
My favorite anarchist.
Thank you. Well, am I? You know a lot of them.
I think you're my favorite.
Okay. Well, that's all.
I mean, self-described anarchist.
Okay. Well, I'll take it. I will see you all next week. You are welcome.